and will be leaving his post in January.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with more on this developing story. John?
Nothing is a sure thing, John, at the White House until it's a sure thing, but sources inside and outside the administration are telling Fox News that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is expected to leave his post. The likely time would probably be in late January, and there's a couple of scenarios that are being discussed for how to replace him. The most likely scenario, I'm told, would be to take Mike Pompeo from his position at the CIA and move him over to the State Department to become the secretary. And then the president would nominate Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton to be the next CIA director. The president really thinks Pompeo is doing a terrific job at the CIA, knows the world really well, and he just has a tremendous respect for Senator Tom Cotton, who really has been faithful to the president on most occasions, a couple of occasions where they parted ways, but for the most part, Senator Cotton really has been supporting the president. A potential second scenario that's being talked about, and I say it's being talked about because I'm told it's far less likely than the first one, would be to move Nikki Haley from her post as the UN ambassador over to the State Department and then elevate Dina Powell, who's a real power player at the National Security Council, over to the United Nations and make her the UN ambassador. One other thing that's being talked about is finding a position for Ivanka Trump at the United Nations. I'm told that one of the things that's being talked about is that she could potentially be appointed a special envoy for women at the United Nations. Sources say Ivanka Trump really wants to get back to New York City, and the president would really like to find a prominent role for her. Now, all of this being said, Rex Tillerson could still stay in his position. He may not leave, but the smart money is really riding on him leaving. The reason being that a lot of people at the State Department and in the administration think that he was never really a good fit there, and certainly the president has been critical of him. Now, as to the timing of his departure, there is a potential tax break here that could be at play as well when he divested of all of his shares in ExxonMobil. If he holds those for a year after being in public service, he can cash those out at at least his investment at a much lower tax rate than he would have had he not stayed for a year. So that might play into the timing as well. The other thing that the president really looking toward here is a vote on tax reform in the Senate. I'm told that the White House believes that there could be a vote. You know, it's been talked about maybe after midnight tonight, but maybe sometime tomorrow morning. The White House had concerns about 3 senators. That's now down to 2. The White House still concerned about Senators Corker and Flake, who want this trigger mechanism to either increase taxes if the revenue projections do not come to pass. There was also talk about maybe a spending cut if the revenue projections don't come to pass, but it looks like they are stuck on this idea of a tax hike. The White House doesn't like it, but is willing to swallow it for the sake of getting passage. You saw Senator John McCain in there as well. The big news reported just before the top of the hour that he released a statement to say that he is on board with the tax reform plan and he will vote yes for it. The president yesterday in St. Charles, Missouri, certainly putting on a big sale and a lot of pressure on members of Congress to get this thing through. Listen here.
This is the right time. We have a moment in time. The Republicans have the Senate. The Republicans have the House. The Republicans have the White House. It's very unusual. Very unusual.
Now, White House sources do tell Fox News that things are looking good for a yes vote in the Senate, but they remind that they have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory before on Obamacare, so they're not counting their chickens before they hatch. And the president, again, in a war of words with UK Prime Minister Theresa May over the president's retweet yesterday morning of 3 videos that were posted on Twitter by the ultra-nationalist anti-immigrant group Britain First. Theresa May saying that Britain First is a hateful organization and that she is not afraid to say that President Trump did the wrong thing in this case. Listen here.
The fact that we work together does not mean that we're afraid to say when we think the United States have got it wrong, and to be very clear with them. And I'm very clear that retweeting from Britain First was the wrong thing to do.
But the president is digging in. But the president is digging in his heels, taking to Twitter last night to say to Theresa May on Twitter, Theresa, don't focus on me, focus on the destructive radical Islamic terrorism that is taking place within the United Kingdom. We are doing just fine. The White House insisted by retweeting those videos, the president was really trying to highlight the threat that the United States and other nations face from radical Islamic terrorism. But at least one of the 3 videos that he retweeted has been called into question as to its authenticity. So there are some people here in the administration who definitely, John, don't think that the president did the right thing.
Another interesting Thursday there at the White House. Our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, thank you.
Yeah, and the hour just began, so we've got much more. The Senate moving ahead on tax reform, beginning its debate on its bill. And a floor vote could actually come as soon as tonight. And Senator John McCain, this just in, saying he is a yes on the plan. That is a very good sign for the GOP. Several senators, along with the head of the Small Business Administration, meeting with entrepreneurs in just the last hour to highlight the importance of tax reform. Chairman of the Senate Republican Policy Committee, John Barrasso, driving home that point earlier on America's Newsroom. Listen.
From the day that Donald Trump was elected president a little over a year ago, we've had 2 million new jobs added to the economy. And now tax relief is the next step. I believe we are ready to really have the economy grow at a much faster rate. We are now on the cusp of a very strong and healthy economy that lets people keep more of their hard-earned money.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live from Capitol Hill with more. Hey, Mike.
Julie, good morning to you. Senator John McCain saying that he thinks this tax reform package, while not perfect, would help American competitiveness, would help the middle class, and would bring much needed tax relief. And so that is a critical step in the effort for Republican leaders to get to 50 yes votes to pass tax reform on the Senate floor. There will be a flurry of activity on the Senate floor in the hours ahead, votes on amendments, and perhaps a final passage vote either late night tonight or early tomorrow. Those behind this tax reform push say this tax reform package should have a huge impact.
A number of people here today who know they're going to be affected by this bill in a positive way, who look forward to seeing the next steps as we get this closer to being on the president's desk. I'm convinced that's going to happen.
Just before the McCain announcement a short time ago, the Senate Majority Leader sounded hopeful they were close to making this happen.
We're on the cusp of a great victory for the country, and particularly for small business. We're in the stretch. You know, horse racing is kind of a big deal in Kentucky. We're going down the home stretch, headed toward the finish line either late tonight or early tomorrow.
As for Democrats, they are expressing some frustration. If Republicans stay unified, there's little they can do to make a difference. And so they're saying at this point that they think this tax package could have been a lot better with some outreach from Republicans.
We didn't have hearings on this bill, and as you said in the lead up here, there's going to be lots of amendments tonight that will change it again, and change it again before it ultimately comes through the Senate. It'll probably pass sometime very late tonight.
Final vote timing is unclear. There are some senators dealing with some significant health issues, and so there's some thought that if they get fatigued tonight, perhaps they come back tomorrow morning and finish up. Julie.
All right, Mike Emanuel, live on Capitol Hill. Thank you. John?
Sure. So President Trump taking his tax reform message to the show me state, as we mentioned, telling people in Missouri the tax plan is a chance to restore American prosperity as the measure gains momentum in the U.S. Senate.
Tax cuts have already passed the House of Representatives. Big ones. The eyes of the world now turn to the United States Senate. A successful vote in the Senate this week will bring us one giant step closer to delivering an incredible victory for the American people. Massive tax cuts and reform.
Joining us now, Richard Rubin, reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Richard, I'm curious, why did the president take that message to Missouri, of all places? He had some choice words for Claire McCaskill, the state's Democratic senator, but he wasn't going to get her on board. And even the vote to get the vote going was 52-48, a Republican-Democrat party line vote.
Yeah, I mean, look, what he's trying to do is put pressure on for 2018. She's up for re-election next year, and so he's looking to expand the majority that they've got in the Senate right now, and he's looking at states where he won in 2016 as ways to go do that. As we've seen so far this year, this 52-48 majority allows them to get some things done, but not nearly as much as they want.
Well, the Republicans really haven't had any huge legislative achievements. Tax reform is their one, probably last big chance in this calendar year. Are they going to do it? Do they have the votes?
They're definitely getting closer. The announcement from Senator McCain this morning makes a big difference. He was one of the holdouts, and his